When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everybody. This is Mark Ledlow with the Fearless Mindset Podcast, and we have a fearless police officer from an Orange County, California-based agency. Oscar is 15 years or whatever it is with SWAT. He's a SWAT team leader, and he's a police officer, active duty, and due to his sensitivity, what he does, we're going to leave that agency left alone. But he is full-time active duty, and we thank you for your service to our country as a police officer, Oscar, and thanks for what you do and keeping our community safe.
Thank you, Mark, and glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
Of course. You know, I know everything's, all these active shooting things taking place right now across the country. You know, we got people training and stuff. You've actually been shot at, according to a mutual friend of ours, Tony, in Orange County. He kind of told me some stories of some stuff that you were involved with that he actually got shot at. So your senses know about that. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, this actually ended up being an active shooter, but it was in 1998, which was a year before, by definition, the term active shooter actually, was developed. So if anybody who has been following or understands, with these all these incidents and these shootings, 1999, the Columbine incident was what really resonated nationwide with regards to active shooters, even though we've had them in the past. But that's what really derived the name, the term. So in 1998, I was a young police officer working weekend graveyards, typical, rookie, if you will. Right. And getting off my graveyard shift, had a court. So my partner and I, after working a full shift, we're walking to court when the call came out of shots fired in the Civic Center area. Of course, naturally, we immediately, raised our radios and started responding. When we responded to this, again, we just thought about it being a shooting in progress. Typically, shootings for what we work with in law enforcement, we usually get there after the fact. We usually get there and, for the most part, assess the scene, provide medical aid for victims, canvas, set up the crime scene, and for investigative purposes. And this was different because as we were responding, the shots are still continuing. So that was, so that's different than, our typical call for service, even though it was a shooting related or a homicide. That really kind of, I had only been a police officer for a couple of years, well, maybe even less than that. And really, to this day, I could remember that day vividly. I've been involved in other officer-involved shootings, obviously, since then. But, this one being the first one was something that was not just more memorializing in my mind, but because of the fact that it involved an active shooter incident. Nevertheless, when we responded, we could see victims down. We could see them running out. Very similar to where our type of training that we do now, and we set up scenarios. When you hear the shots, officers are starting to, now we respond. We don't wait. And the scene that we set up for these scenarios for our officers, with people running out, possibly shot, the shooter still being inside. I lived that. And again, this was before receiving any type of training. Long story short, when we did ultimately encounter the suspect, he was barricaded in a room with multiple people inside there. The door was locked. We could hear yelling and screaming for help. And we couldn't see the shooter. We didn't know what was happening. At that time, a supervisor had joined my partner and I, and ultimately made the decision to force entry on the door to provide not just a medical aid for those that were shot, but to go in and neutralize that threat. In the process of that, there was 5 of us in total in a confined space. 3 out of the 5 officers involved were shot. Thankfully, none of us were, fatally wounded, but we ultimately engaged the shooter, provided the medical aid, and rescued those victims. At that time, we were criticized by our supervisors, or at least not just supervisors, but within the law enforcement community, why we rushed it. We should have waited for tactical teams. We should have waited for SWAT. Of course, that wasn't a decision I'd like to take credit for, but I stand behind it. I think the supervisor who made the decision was the right decision to make. And ultimately fortunately it was a success. And then of course, a year later with Columbine and then things changing, looking at it now, it was exactly what we were supposed to do, but at the time we didn't know it. So that was
no
very
training really back then. It was all new. It was all a new science, behavior science.
Exactly. So it was one of those things where it wasn't until several years later that we were recognized for that. They awarded all of us that were involved in that the Medal of Valor, which I thought was nice. But it was, like I said, after the fact. And since then that really sat dear in my heart, not just for the sake of the victims and being able to be there and provide for them, but also for our training in law enforcement, the passion that I have for training. Like you said, I've been on our SWAT team for a little over 18 years now. I'm very passionate about training. And right now I am, for the last 7, maybe 8 years, I've been the lead instructor for the county with regards to active shooter training for all our first responders, including fire. So, wow. Yeah, it's just something that, again, I take it very serious. And most importantly, I care about on both ends. I care that we provide that response and that for the community. But at the same token, I care about our officers, our medical staff, that they, that we are constantly looking at best practices and, getting the training and equipment that we need.
Wow, that's incredible. Just all that. That's a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience right there. Now, from the date that first experience as a rookie, that first active shooter experience as a rookie, and how you reacted, your psychological response to that stimulation to all the other shootings you've been through, can you tell now through your experiences you react differently and your thought processes are much quicker and faster because you've seen it before? Or are they all the same, or are they all different?
No, they're all different, but it's funny you mention it because, at that time, I was shoulder to shoulder with the supervisor that, like I said, that was with us. He had a shotgun with slugs, ammunition, and he shot all 4 of his rounds literally right shoulder to shoulder with me in a indoor confined room. And I don't remember hearing any of that. I didn't hear. I mean, had they not mentioned that he had done that, I would not even have. I would not have guessed. I would have bet my next 2 paychecks that did not happen.
So you went in tunnel vision.
100%, tunnel vision. Everything from losing my hearing, and having things really, really slow down. Mm-hmm. And so now I fast forward to, I guess, one of the shootings, my last shooting, that last shooting that I was involved in, it was just me with obviously with the suspect. And it was still obviously very intense. And it's still, I can't say that it was, I wasn't, adrenaline and I wasn't scared. But sure. At the same token, based on now almost 20 years in between of experience and training, I was able to even know how many rounds I shot. Wow. I was mindful of my backdrop. I considered that just prior to that because it was in like a street and a residential side.
Right.
So, it's just, I attribute that with, like you said, with the experiences and the training that I received. But that's not to say that the next one I won't go code black or completely go back to, being a shutdown. That it just so happened. That's all I'm saying. It just so happened that I could differentiate the two. But I am very much aware that we're human and our reactions. I don't know how the next one will be, and I hope to God I don't get involved in another one. But if
Amen,
it does
brother.
happen,
Amen.
yeah, it's like I can't imagine. How I will respond. So to say, "Oh, this is what we'll do," no, not until that day happens, we'll know what we'll do exactly.
Well, I'm glad you're okay. And not the man of 9 lives. I guess I'll call your call sign "Man of 9 Lives," Oscar. Now that with all that experience, that created a passion in you to write that book that you published not too long ago in part of your training module, right?
Yeah. So, with all that, I mean, I do, like I said, a lot for the first responders, but I started getting a lot of interest from the civilian, the community. I started providing training and awareness for schools. That's kind of where it started. Businesses, hospitals, religious groups, where it was now become more of the awareness side. So I found myself educating more of non-sworn and civilians with regards to these types of incidents, that I became even more passionate about it. And that's just something that I feel that the more I can educate, not just our first responders but others, and for survival, the better we'll be. Because although nothing is going to be, there is no magic cure. There is no specific thing to do to say, you do this and you will avoid being a victim, or you will avoid this type of incident. What I found is that with everything that's out there, the preparation and the mental mindset of one is what's going to be the most critical. If you could prevent, or you could perhaps identify a threat prior to that threat occurring, you're going to be so much more ahead than the most skilled or trained professional, having to react to something like that. So that's why I feel it's important for me to, share that, whether it be in a book, whether it be, in all my seminars, if you will, and all the trainings and presentations I've given. I stress that. I think the majority of my presentation is just on that, on that mental mindset and awareness and being prepared, because really, we may encounter something where we have no choice and we will have to be reactive to that. So we do discuss those things. But if we could perhaps position ourselves and be aware, situational awareness, knowing knowing where your evacuation, your exits are at, knowing what to do, being seated, placing yourself in positions that will give you a little bit more of the advantage, looking for, the unusuals, and then also formulating already somewhat of a plan in the event something was to happen. What will you do? All those things are really become most critical. So that I find myself now focusing just as much energy and time for that, as well as the actual tactics and training.
That makes sense. I mean, the psychological, like you said, is 90% psychological on how you react when you hear bullets around downrange blast. Something the mind is not accustomed to hearing, except for maybe 4th of July. All of a sudden they hear that in the workplace, they go, "What is this?" And then their brain goes scrambled because they're not conditioned for those stimulations.
Correct.
And so then they naturally react. What is the biggest request or inquiries you're getting from clients out there, from corporations to business owners to big companies? What do they want from you in a training session?
So when they reach out, they just want to know, first and foremost, what we can provide them. Sometimes they're not really even sure what type of training that they could receive, because they've seen, drills, they've seen big scenario type trainings. They've seen classroom seminar kind of presentations. And so they just kind of want to know. And And so what I do is I sit down with these companies and I pretty much, identify, pretty much the steps. And, one of the first things we look at, we consider with anything is, doing a risk assessment. So wherever the location may be, a structure vulnerability, identifying before you start making decisions and actions as to what are we going to do and spending money. It's very important to identify, and I know our weakness, our areas of concern, and truly, professionally coming in and there and seeking that out. So a risk assessment is very important for any company or organization to, start off with, identifying those things. And then even taking that next step would be then doing like tabletop exercises where we get 10, 12 of the department heads, the decision makers, policies, safety wardens, and so forth within those companies. And we conduct a tabletop for them. Right. And when we do those, you identify your gaps. So you think you're strong in one area or you think you may be weak, but until we have an outsider come in and tabletop a certain type of scenario or exercise there with the group, they really become aware of where their gaps are at. And so we fill them in on those, but the majority of the training then becomes with the active shooter awareness. You hear a lot of the terms, the run, hide, fight, type
think
of
about
training.
all those terms.
What's that?
What do you think about all those terminologies? Run, hide, fight. What does that really? Is that really constructive? Is that positive or negative in training? What's your thoughts on all that?
So, of course, that when we talk about that with the FBI, with the the Fed, when they develop these names, it's you got to reach out for a big group, right? So it's like, how do we say something, put something on where people will recall and remember it. But there's a lot more to than just run, hide, fight, and that's where we when you break it down, there is a lot because initially running and evacuating a location. Yeah. It is a strong consideration. However, that may not always be the best case for you. Okay, so it's all situational based, and that's where I think when people just feel like everything is just it's just going to be black and white. This is what we do. We run or not. We hide, and if we can't do that, we'll have to fight. There is that is true. However, there's a lot of in between, and it's case by case because evacuating and running initially may or may not be. It just depends on the scenario. And so when we break it down, we start talking about different types. The best alternative would be maybe not to hide, continue to run and do everything you can to try to avoid it, even though you may be bypassing the shooter.
Different organizations may have different needs. And it seems like there's different instructors out there. I wonder, are they doing a cookie cutter approach in teaching active shooter techniques, you think? Or what's your thoughts on all that?
I hope not, but the reality is probably. And that's the thing is because, you could, most of the stuff, I tell these companies, I say, most of the stuff you do yourself, you research it, you do the research, you could find policies, you could find procedures, you could find, what it is and being taught and trained out there 100%. You don't need me to come in. I don't need to charge you to fill you in on certain things. However, what I found is that they want beyond that because that cookie cutter approach, these companies, they understand, at least, most of them do, that it's about them demonstrating proficiency. So it not just having a check the box, a policy, somebody to come in and say, yeah, well, we provide that training. They need to understand that they need to be able to demonstrate how proficient are you and your staff on it. And that alone is not going to cut it, is not going to make, or is not going to provide for that proficiency. And so, coming in there, we express that, we explain that, hey, there's different ways of doing it. If you have somebody else that comes in, I 100%, agree that they could come in and provide this type of training. And most of the time it's they're on point, but unfortunately sometimes, I have seen, individuals or companies come in and professionals could tell. A professional could come in and say, all right, this individual is just really utilizing this, simple cookie cutter, like you say, approach. and they truly, they don't truly understand the big picture. And of course, but that's from another professional to identify it. Most companies, they won't know, they don't understand, so they're just going to rely on that individuals based on their credibility or just based on the position. So I think if you really sit down and truly ask yourself if what they're providing is going to allow them to be proficient and having a different understanding, I think that's where they really will see the difference.
Gotcha. Like yourself, you've been in several active shooter situations as a police officer and on SWAT. So your stimulation and your experiences will be different from each person you talk to, representing different organizations. They may have different needs, different threats, because, like you said, risk assessment, threat assessment for each client.
Yes, because I've seen them come in and instructors say, "Oh, you know what? No, if this happens, this is what you need to do." And no, you don't want to do that. You want to do this. Well, the reality is, you don't know what they're going to do. You know what I mean? We got to give them options. Shoot, we may not know exactly 100%. We hope that our response is going to be one of what we've been trained for, one that we prepared ourselves for. But the reality is that until you're there, you're truly trusting on your training, and that's why it's important for them to understand that that training that we're receiving and the experiences, it's so important, because they may fall back just on that, what we're being explain to them. And if you tell them, hey, it's only this way, and that didn't work for them, they're going to be back to square one. They're not going to know what's happening. However, if we explain to them that there's different decisions they can make here, but the mindset and really truly understanding, like, hey, at the end of the day, you're going to react differently. We're going to have different expectations, but here's the reality, and I'm going to give it to them. And sometimes, like the presentations that I do, the first, if it's a 90-minute presentation, the first hour is all on preparation and mindset. And really only get into about 30 minutes of actually what it is, how we're doing it, because that'll lead to what we expect, what we really want to touch on. And then from there, they'll understand, like, okay, this is here, but everything we just discussed, we're going to branch off into different areas, and it provides them for just more of an awareness and just more opportunities for them, and not feeling like this is the only way, because many of them will sit there and hear you tell them this, and in their minds, they're like, there's no way. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. There's no way. And I don't blame them. Everyone's different. But if I provide them different alternatives, and I could ease their mind, explain to them, look, if you're feeling this way, it's okay. Yeah, it's natural. Here's these other options, and this is why we would like for you to do it. And this is, these are the reasons. I found that it really does open them, and they appreciate it, and they find themselves gaining more from it.
So your job and your goal and role in going into a corporation or any business entity is to try and attempt to remove the fear factor out of people's minds, to when and if this does occur in their office place, so they know how to react and have strength, and then they have courage to respond to a perpetrator with a gun or a knife or a situation going bad really quick.
Yes, 100%. It's like, if I could get you to push out your vision and open it up a little bit, at the end of the day, you're going to make we're human. So we're going to make decisions. We're going to react. It's when we don't have, the ability to make, or have the opportunity to make these decisions, is when we'll go, like you said, like a code black, and we'll just kind of shut down. And that's why I tell them that, look, for us in law enforcement, we train to stress inoculation, right? We try to put ourselves in situations where they're high stress, and try to inoculate our brains, our minds, so that we become somewhat of accustomed to perhaps situations like that, so that when we do encounter them, we're still going to be, our adrenaline, our heart rate's going to go up, but we're able to at least, break free from that and make hopefully sound decisions, but at least decisions.
Right.
And we can't provide that always to all the, these businesses and in the civilian world. So, however, if I really truly settle it in your mind that, this is the reality and these are the concerns and these are what to look for. And this is what can save your life and truly open their vision and allow them to think for themselves rather than just, shut down and feel like this is only one way of doing things is ultimately is my goal. At least when I present to them, I really truly try to put them at ease and get them that position.
That makes sense. And for the viewers and the audience of the podcast, this is Oscar, and he is an active duty police officer with a agency in Orange County, California. And if you have businesses out there anywhere in the West Coast, I'm sure Oscar would love to hear from you. Where's the best place for them to reach you, Oscar?
You can reach me at the Lizardi Training Center, LTC. That would probably be the best way. At the same token, like I said, through you, the information I could provide you, my information, and they could contact you, Mark, and
Good.
Certainly, I'm here to assist and help out. Not just our law enforcement community, our first responders, like I said, but anybody outside of that, and it's not always at a price. Just these conversations like we're having and
Right.
coming over and discussing and providing them with my experiences, my knowledge, and then direction. Because, like I said, a lot of it they can do themselves.
And so the audience, refresh the audience, the listeners out there. Oscar is 18 years on the SWAT team. He's the SWAT team leader, active duty cop. He's been a police officer for how many years? 20 plus years now?
24, almost 25.
Wow, that's a long time. So Oscar's got several years of experience. He's been in multiple shootings himself, been shot at. And so he understands the stimulation, the psychological approach of an active shooter situation. And he can express it as a teacher into an environment, to a company that wants to hire him to help their employees feel safe, or religious organizations are out there. And I know Southern California is a growing market. There's a lot of businesses down there in Irvine, Tustin area, very explosive growth right now, and they could probably use your services. And if you want to get a hold of Oscar, you can reach out to Fearless Mindset Podcast. My email on my website's there. You can reach that way. And then, are you on Instagram, Oscar, or anything like that? You're on Facebook. Okay.
On both, for, like I said, Lizardi, that's lizard with an I at the end. That's I always tell them that. Lizardi Training Center. And the number that we use for the company is 833 LTC PREP, PREP.
Got it.
Preparation is the key to success.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
and you're on Facebook too with your Lizardi Training Institute. I've seen that. Probably just Google you and you'll come up as well. And I just want to bring you on and just create an awareness, because the fact is, everybody's going crazy out there right now. We just had the one shooting in Atlanta, and then we just had something. I'm just losing track of all these shootings. I'm honestly losing track.
Yeah, no, and it's sad. When I started teaching active shooter about 15 years ago, it's like every incident, we knew it. We debriefed it. Every single time I was coming, we had all the details. And it's so sad to say that now, as they all come in, yes, we review them, but it's just unfortunately when you're averaging, 25, 27 a year in our nation,
wow.
that's a lot.
25 a year. That's a lot of shootings.
So, yeah, if you look down, I'd say the last 4 years, it's in there. It's in about the mid 20s. Some of them even up to 27, 28. Shootings. Mass shootings. On an annual basis. It's just so sad that we have to deal with not only the incident but the number of incidents.
Now, the Colorado shooting that took place in Boulder last week, did the investigation come up with any answers yet on the suspect, his motives, anything like that yet been exposed yet?
I don't know. And I would not even I don't think I'd even feel comfortable in commenting on that. But
okay.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Some of these is just, it's just one of those things where these investigations take some time. Sure. There's a lot of work behind it. And even when they do, it's very hard to really pinpoint to say, what, why, and how things, transpired the way they did. And for the sake of the community too, I would, hope that, we also try to keep our, those types of like either whether it be opinions or, until they come up with the appropriate, response and the appropriate investigation, because, they're already suffering enough. And
exactly. Very true.
And for having, to have others, on the outside with minimal information already start, commenting or providing. So I personally just feel like that's just not, fair for that organization, for that city, and for the victims. But, so I like to wait for the final after action reports and, for us to get a thorough reading. Then I could comment on based on that information, and become, let it be as accurate as possible.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's well said. There's too many things. I've watched Facebook once in a while, and people just going off a tangent on opinions without facts from evidence. And it's like,
exactly.
They get in a tizzy tailspin of opinion, and they really don't know what they're talking about because they're not on the ground like you guys, detectives on the ground investigating a crime. And it's like, people, come on, let's wait for the facts before we start jumping to conclusions.
And even the professionals that would have opinions, we all, you still see, differences of opinions. So like you said, wait for the facts. But
now, how is crime in Southern California? I know there's a lot of businesses, they're starting to open up. COVID, they're starting to get control of COVID. Are you guys seeing an increase in calls in your communities down there in Orange County? Is it getting wacky?
I wouldn't say it's getting wacky, but it is. Unfortunately, it has increased. Unfortunately, COVID, from my experience, it not only shut us all down like we all experienced it, but for the criminal element, what we found was we were arresting felony type crimes, felonious acts on suspects. And initially, in the initial stages, they weren't being booked, they weren't being held in the jails because of that. So these criminals knew that, hey, I could go out and carjack, I could go and commit a robbery, even shoot at somebody, and then be out the very next day, or just to kind of recommit. So that's a concern because we saw that happening, and it was all a direct result of them not taking these arrestees.
Right. Wow.
But overall, every city has their own, crime reporting data and, information. But, and that's public record. So whatever city, one would live in or reside in, you could just look it up and it's all public records and you'll be able to see the increase or decrease in percentage. But from like I said, my personal experience, I've seen, unfortunately, it's sad that, in the area that I work, it's some areas within that city are very high crime rate. So we're constantly, dealing with these types of crimes, and we've seen the increase in shootings, so.
Wow, a lot to cover. Well, Oscar, I know you're busy. I don't want to pick all your evening up, and I just wanted to get you on here and just discuss what you're passionate about, the active shooter situations out there. Yeah. And I'm going to come down there probably end of April and force out with Oscar's schedule. I'm going to have him in the studio there in Irvine, and we'll probably about to talk about the current trends and what's happening out there, and more in depth and detail the psychology approach of active shooter training. So, with that said, if you want to get a hold of Oscar, you can reach out to me, and Oscar has, you can probably Google Lizardi Training Institute, find him that way too. And you can reach me as well. And I think that's about all I got for the moment. And I just wanted to talk to you about this because it's such a hot topic right now in the season we're in. And anything to add, Oscar?
No, you wrapped it up, but anything we can do to help out, like I said, it's a passion of mine to not only help others teach, but anything I can do for you, Mark, for your viewers, and provide, because that's what we're in. The business is not to be a financially gained business. This is to help others. Most of the services that I offer, it's not for a profit. Some of it, the only reason why I charge is just because it is time consuming, and it has to, I have to require for others and myself. But if there's anything that I can do that, that does not require that, I'm here to help and to be able to do the best and educate with all the experience and the investment that's been put on me from my agency. So if I could give back, that's my way of giving back to the community.
Well, it's generous of you, Oscar. You got the right servant's heart, being a police officer down there, and it's not very often you see that within people in the business world. They want to give back, like you said, and I commend you for that. Once again, thanks for your service as a police officer and covering the blue.
Thank you, sir. You bet, Mark. Take care, sir.
You too. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.